Before the moonwalk, before the sequined glove, before the whole world knew his name, he was just a boy, 6 years old, standing on a stage in Gary, Indiana, a steel town with broken streets and zero guarantees, singing like he had already lived 1,000 lives. The crowd went silent, not because they were polite, because they had never heard anything like that come out of a human body before. That boy did not just have talent. He had something that cannot be taught, cannot be bought, and cannot be explained. He had it from birth, and the world would spend the next 5 decades trying to understand it. His name was Michael Joseph Jackson, and before the fame made him a god, the industry made him a product. The media made him a target, and the loneliness of a childhood stolen too soon left wounds that no amount of success could ever fully heal. He sold 750 million records. He invented dance moves that defied the laws of physics. He broke every racial barrier MTV ever put up. He gave over $500 million to charity in his lifetime. And yet, he died alone at 50 years old in a rented mansion with a doctor by his side instead of a friend. This is not just a music biography. This is the story of the most talented human being who ever walked onto a stage, and what the world did to him in return.
The spotlight found Michael Jackson before he was ready for it, before he was old enough to understand what fame was. It had already consumed him. Michael was born on August 29, 1958, the 7th of 9 children, in a 2-bedroom house in Gary, Indiana, a city built on steel and smoke, where the air was gray and the future was uncertain for almost everyone who lived there. His father, Joseph Jackson, was a man who saw talent, the way a machine sees raw material, something to be processed, shaped, and monetized. Joseph was not a father first. He was a manager first. He drilled the Jackson brothers for hours every single day, rehearsals that did not end until perfection was achieved. And perfection, in Joseph Jackson's house, was never quite achieved. Michael would later recall being beaten with a belt for missing a dance step, being called names that no father should ever say to his child, being looked at, not with love, but with calculation. What can you do? What can you earn? What are you worth? And the tragedy, the deepest wound of all, Michael delivered, every single time. At 6 years old, he was already the most magnetic performer in the Jackson 5, a child who moved like water, sang like fire, and held an audience, the way gravity holds the earth, without effort, without strain, simply by existing. By the time he was 10, he was a professional entertainer, working, touring, recording, while other boys his age were riding bikes, playing outside, falling asleep with no alarm to wake them. Michael was on stage, night after night, city after city, performing emotions he was too young to have lived. He never had a childhood, not a real one, and the absence of that, of those lost years, those stolen afternoons, those ordinary moments, that money can never buy back, followed him for the rest of his life, like a shadow he could never outrun. Then came adolescence, and with it, something that broke him, in a way no belt ever could. His face. As Michael entered his teens, his skin developed severe acne. His nose, which he had always been deeply insecure about, became a target for his own father, who mocked him publicly, called him names, pointed at it in front of others, as if his son's face was a problem to be solved. For a boy who lived in front of cameras, whose image was his identity, whose face was broadcast to millions of people, this was not embarrassment, this was devastation. The insecurity planted in those years would grow into something the world would later misunderstand completely. And then, just as Michael was finding his own artistic voice, just as he was beginning to separate himself from the Jackson 5 and become something entirely his own, the industry reminded him of his place. Radio stations hesitated. MTV refused to play black artists. When Thriller was submitted, the greatest album the music industry had ever received, the establishment hesitated. A black artist, pop music, did not fit the format. Michael Jackson did not argue, did not protest, did not beg. He let the music speak, and the music burned the walls down. But even as Thriller broke every record ever set, even as the world finally opened its doors, Michael Jackson stood on the other side of that door, still carrying the boy from Gary, Indiana, still carrying the bruises nobody could see, still searching, desperately, quietly, painfully, for the childhood that was taken from him before he even knew it was gone. January 25, 1983. Motown 25, a television special celebrating 25 years of the greatest record label in history. Michael Jackson walked onto that stage. As a star, he walked off it. As a legend, for the first time, in front of 47 million viewers, he performed the moonwalk. One move, 5 seconds, forever. The audience screamed, before they even understood what they had just witnessed, because the body does not need the mind's permission to recognize magic, and what they saw that night was not choreography, it was a new language, invented by one man, spoken by nobody before him, copied by everyone after, but the moonwalk was just the opening statement. The real turning point had already begun 1 year earlier, in a recording studio, with Quincy Jones. Thriller, released November 30th, 1982, the best-selling album in the history of recorded music, 66 million copies sold, a number that still has not been touched, 7 singles, 7 Billboard Top 10 hits, from a single album. That had never happened before. It has never happened since. But even Thriller the album was not the moment. Everything changed. It was Thriller the film, 14 minutes long, directed like a Hollywood movie, a zombie Michael Jackson dancing in the dark, and the entire world stopped what it was doing to watch it together. MTV, the same network that had refused to play black artists, aired it on loop, by demand, by force, because the audience would not accept anything else. Michael Jackson did not break the color barrier. He made the color barrier irrelevant. Then came the Bad Tour, 1987, 123 concerts, 15 countries, 4.4 million people. Every single show sold out. He performed in stadiums that had never hosted a solo artist before, because no solo artist had ever needed that much space. He was not a musician anymore. He was a phenomenon, a category of one. And off the stage, the transformation was just as seismic. Pepsi, NBC, CBS, Hollywood, fashion, art, every industry wanted a piece of Michael Jackson, because Michael Jackson made everything he touched larger than it was before. He bought the Beatles catalog, the most valuable music library on earth, for $47 million. A business move so sharp, it stunned an entire industry. He was not just performing anymore. He was building an empire. Neverland Ranch, a kingdom built for the child he never got to be. Roller coasters, a zoo, a cinema, flower gardens, all of it. A man trying to buy back the childhood the world had taken from him. The turning point of Michael Jackson was not one moment. It was the realization, felt by an entire planet, simultaneously, that they were watching something that would never exist again. A once and forever. June 25th. 2009, the day the music stopped, not metaphorically, not poetically, actually stopped. Michael Jackson, the greatest entertainer who ever lived, was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. in Los Angeles, California. 50 years old. The cause: acute propofol intoxication, a surgical anesthetic being used as a sleeping aid by a doctor who was being paid to keep a performer alive long enough for one more tour. This is it, the comeback, the final chapter. 50 sold-out shows at the O2 Arena in London. He never made it to opening night. When the news broke, the internet collapsed. Twitter went down. Google thought it was under a cyber attack because so many people searched his name simultaneously. CNN reported it, then reported it again, because the first time nobody believed it. Outside his rented mansion in Holmby Hills, fans gathered within minutes, within hours, thousands, from every country, every language, every age. Grown men who had learned to moonwalk in their bedrooms as children wept openly on the street, because Michael Jackson was not just a musician. To the people who loved him, he was the soundtrack of their entire lives. The song playing when they fell in love, the video they watched 100 times on a Saturday morning, the concert they saved up for and never forgot. He was personal to everyone all at once. And then came what history will record as one of its greatest failures of justice: the allegations, the trials, the media circus that consumed the final decade of his life, stripping him of his dignity piece by piece, while the world watched and formed opinions, without evidence, without mercy, without pause. A man who gave $500 million to charity, who funded hospitals and children's programs across 39 countries, who was acquitted on all 14 counts in 2005, was still sentenced, not by a court, but by public opinion, and he carried that sentence every single day, until the day he died. But legacy, real legacy, cannot be cancelled, cannot be reduced, cannot be rewritten, by those who never understood what they were looking at. The numbers do not lie. 750 million records sold, still the best-selling solo artist in history. 13 Grammy Awards, 26 American Music Awards, the only artist ever inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice. His music is played today, in 2026, at the same volume, with the same electricity, in the same packed rooms, as it was in 1983. That is not popularity, that is immortality. Every artist who performs today, Beyoncé, Bruno Mars, Usher, The Weeknd, Justin Timberlake, every single one of them has stood in the shadow of Michael Jackson and learned from it. He did not just influence music, he defined what a performer is supposed to be, a standard so high that decades after his death, nobody has reached it. The boy from Gary, Indiana, the one who never got to be a child, the one who was beaten for missing a dance step, the one who died alone in a rented house, gave the world something it will never be able to give back. Joy, pure, electric, timeless joy. And as long as one person, anywhere on this earth, hears Billie Jean and feels something move inside them, Michael Jackson is not gone. He is just on the other side of the music, still dancing, still spinning, still electric, the king of pop.